Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Work podcast. Today, we are going to talk about all things related to private jet experience, private jet solutions. Bringing in an expert, Cameron. Without any further ado, please introduce yourself and the company you represent, and we'll start with that.
I'm Cam Parker. I represent Jet Access. I am the Director of Aviation Sales for the company, and I am tasked to bring this wonderful company to three new markets.
I'm looking forward to the conversation because for me, coming from a small town in Poland, very far, much far away from where I'm living right now in California, far away from United States. Private jet was something not even out of the movies, was completely different stratosphere for everyone around. So I'm really interested to hear about your story and how you got into that industry. It seems like a very interesting industry, and it's actually becoming more and more accessible for people who need to travel more often than everyone else. So I'd be curious to hear what is your background? How did you end up in that industry, in that role?
So I always had a fascination with aviation. So out of the gate, I'm a military background. I was in some pretty special units, and I served up at Fort Campbell. And when I was in the military, they had this new program that actually paid for you to become a pilot. So I ended up taking advantage of that, got all my pilot ratings, um, flipped my commercial, and started flying for a 135 slash flight school in Nashville. So normally I ended up moving on and transitioning out of the military and started flying. And I had a few people reach out and encourage me to try this thing called business aviation and corporate aviation. Well, as a pilot, you needed more time in order to move on and be in that world and really experience the benefits. But I also had a business background, which that gave me a little bit more of a leg up, and I learned how to actually sell and schedule corporate jets at the time.
Interesting. Thank you for your service, of course. And how long have you been in the military for?
5 years.
5 years. All right. Yeah, that teaches you valuable lessons. I can imagine. What was so most memorable lessons for you that you take away from those 5 years? I'm asking because I had on a podcast a retired major general who's been 40 years in the army, and now he's teaching Fortune 100 companies and 500 Fortune 500 companies as well, of course, on leadership and discipline. So I'm curious to hear your take. What did you take away really from the 5 years in the military that are helping you or shaping you, perhaps how you operate now in the business world?
I would say two things. In the military, you learned everything was very structured and everything was very controlled. Coming to the civilian side of the world, there's not a whole lot of structure. Leaning back on my military training and being able to dissect how things really work, and you can actually simplify something, and then you can go into a unstructured scenario, put structure there, and no matter how chaotic it is, you always can fill it back into that box where it can feel back to a somewhat controlled environment. The other thing I learned from the military was how to communicate with people with multiple backgrounds. It's something that I think it's taken for granted because there's a lot of diversity in culture, and a lot people have different communication styles, and understanding how to communicate effectively against or across different groups is very important in the civilian world as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I agree with you on the lack of structure. It's definitely recognizable across the board. And I always like the or have the comparison between United States and Europe because that's obviously where we're from. Yeah, across the globe, it's a lack of structures. It's a very common thing. So I can imagine that that will be something that you can take away from military, other than discipline, which I can imagine is definitely something that everyone who has experience with the military will have. Yeah, I wish I was the last the last actually 3 or 4 years before me, there was still military training necessary, like not necessary, but you had to go through the training for 3 to 6 months, I believe, back in Poland. And my age and until 1991, yeah, I think 1991, they stopped already doing any sorts of trainings, which I think is wrong. Honestly, nothing can go wrong when you're sent to the military for 3 months and learn some basics. How to operate, like you said, how to communicate, how to be around other individuals, and learn how to navigate through that. That can definitely help you in the business world, whether you're operating your own business or growing within a business, or if you're just working with other people. It definitely great skills there. So back to your role at Jet Access, you said you're expanding into 3 new different markets. What does it mean? How does it look like?
So Jet Access is an Indiana-based company, and they have expanded through mergers and acquisitions, um, all the way from they actually go back to 1980s. So they're a pretty well-known company in Indiana, rebranded a few different times, changed ownership a few different times as well. But in Indiana or Indianapolis, they have created a ecosystem for people that fly private aviation or people that use private aviation. So usually with companies, you either have a management company or a charter company or a flight school or a maintenance facility. But these guys have put the entire aviation portfolio together under one umbrella company, which allows them to really tailor the service specific to a client. So in Nashville specifically, these guys have created a concept inside of their business, which is now going to be it's a private terminal, and it's state of the art, almost as if it's almost as if it's a cigar lounge, cigar uh, private club, bringing it into the airport environment. So
Inter-
typically, when you're flying private and you go into an FBO, you are um, you either go into a Signature and Atlantic, and it's semi-crowded. You don't know who, you don't always know who the line people are. You don't always know who the who's coming in and out, and you don't really have control over that environment. Whereas with the private terminal, it's going to be a very personal touch where you know exactly who the front desk lady is. You're going to get the same pilots that come in and out of the facility all the time, and it really is a group of people that are pretty well connected, and they know each other, and it's almost like a home away from home, or you probably call it a club away from home that everybody is kind of acquainted, and they that's where they go to get on and off their planes.
Interesting. So, who are your typical clients? Did you mention Cigar Lunch? Did I hear it correctly? And Cigar Lunch on the private airport, private terminal, or
Well, I don't know if we're gonna be smoking cigars there, but it'll have the same style. And
I see that the same style. Okay, now I can imagine, because when I visited my first cigar launch actually I was invited to one in Beverly Hills, which was pretty good experience for the first cigar launch, even though I don't I don't even smoke yet, I guess I should say, because that's coming, I guess. It was pretty amazing. I can imagine what kind of clientele you can bring into that environment, because there's all kinds of actors. Arnold hangs out there a lot with his buddies, a bunch of executives. Everyone was suit and tie pretty much, even though it was a casual Friday afternoon. They were all pretty
absolutely,
pretty higher end, I would say, as you would expect. And I hear it takes like 7 years or 6, 7 years on the wait list on average to get there, because they don't do a lot of turnarounds. Pretty much someone has to, I guess, pass right to to open up some space. Well, it's quite interesting. So, who are your typical clients? Clientele, are there corporate clients only, or do you have also celebrities, or now perhaps crypto bros from all around the world, or your typical clients?
well, you typically see a wide array of clients. They range from people in the music industry, executives and artists, all the way down to songwriters. Obviously, we have some business owners and C-suite executives as well. But in terms of charter clients, you see anybody that wants a little bit more discretion, and they have a little less flexibility in regards to timing, and they will tend to spend a lot more money just to control their schedule and maintain their timeliness on their terms than to necessarily go into an airline scenario.
Makes sense. Yes, and those are also you will you maybe you already have some sort of membership. Because I remember one company that was popular amongst tennis players that when they travel a lot, and for example when they have tournaments in the United States, they are usually within 1 or 2 months, and then they're gone for another 6 months out of completely different parts of the world. So during
Mhm.
the time, this sort of membership where it allows them to essentially get access to private aviation or transportation, but without being tied into a plane in the United States or a local plane, having to manage it, hiring pilot, the crew, and managing all of that. So essentially, is that something that Jet Access also offers for your clients, or will consider doing that in the future?
That's something that's becoming very popular, and it definitely can be an opportunity in the future.
Got it. Yeah, well, sounded interesting. I remember they were bringing some of the tennis players or their managers rather or coaches are were bringing those booklets from those private jets with all kinds of deals, like a whole book of deals. Those were essentially partners that work with their private chartering company, and those deals were actual freaking deals. I mean, there is like deals that you can go get anywhere else for all kinds of steakhouses, very popular steakhouses in the United States, great experiences, golf experiences, and all kinds of things. So that's brings in great partnerships. I can imagine that will obviously bring business to you. So now with your expansion, your job is to expand into three different areas. And how do you approach that? You've mentioned before we hit record that you're doing research. So how does it work? Do you have to find those clients in that particular area, or what kind of research are you doing that is helping you in the company that you're with?
So a lot of times in this industry, everything starts with the aircraft owner, and there's a lot of air owners in America specifically that aren't necessarily educated on the different options they have with their asset. So my job, essentially in the beginning, in doing market research, is finding out and educating the owners that may not be utilizing their asset to the best of its ability, and being able to teach them ways to utilize the asset before it hits an accelerated depreciation model. So when I do touch base with those guys, and I am able to educate them on different strategies, a lot of times it bleeds over into other parts of our business, where we're then able to set up charters, do fancy things like memberships, and then also do reserve block times for some of those guys. And sometimes we're even able to give them discounts on with our fleet and our wide array of network.
Interesting. So just in case someone is listening who might own a plane or might be interested in your services, so tell us about the benefits of that. First of all, my question is, you've mentioned it starts with the owners. So what kind of planes are you talking about? Are those only G4, G5 type of planes? Are we talking about smaller planes as well? Or are we talking about even something completely different?
So most of our clientele are going to be geared towards the jet side. The private jets are the easiest in regards to putting a business around it and making it a successful asset. Pistons and turboprops typically do well as well, but it's a different strategy than what we would be referring to right here.
Got it. So we're talking about bigger jet, I guess you can say two engine or more.
Yes,
Is that
twin
got it?
engine jets.
Okay. And So you say that owners of these two jets, they don't even consider some cases to essentially, unless they fly all the time, which sometimes it happens, but they don't consider sometimes a management company to benefit, financially benefit from that ownership as well.
Well, a lot of times there's no knowledge of the management companies, and the management companies that do already exist and they do know of, sometimes they don't have the best reputation. What you tend to find in this industry is it's almost like the wild, wild west. Like
Wow. Tell me
it's
about it. Now you got me curious. I never would think that you would have anything but elite experience across the what I mean.
well, when you're in an industry with so many zeros behind it, it's a everybody wants to play,
Mm,
but not everybody's an expert in what they're doing. So yeah,
interesting.
it's very prudent to do your research and really study the person that's going to be representing you and be the person that's going to be taking care of you as a management company or even as a broker for that matter.
So what do you do to stand out and obviously show care upfront? Maybe in other words, let me rephrase it. What do you do to start that relationship and nurture that relationship? Because I can imagine that's what it takes to really get someone on board who build a relationship if they've heard maybe about some bad experience in the industry, which I'm surprised to hear. But I guess it works just like in any other industry. There's always some bad apples here and there. So what do you do to build those relationships when you reach out to someone and you know that they might potentially be a great fit, they might benefit from this partnership collaboration? What do you do to do that?
The best way to nurture the relationship is to educate the client. From my experience, slowly showing them how we can provide value to them and how we've done it in the past, it's something that gives them a little bit more um, reassurance that they're making a good decision. The other way to break into this industry and do a fantastic job is just really knocking it out of the park with one client and letting them be your voice to the next client. That alone has generated more business than doing any cold outreach.
Yeah, I can imagine. But it's good to hear that pretty much works just like in every other industry. You have to build relationship, you have to show that you've done some good service for others and you can benefit from it as well. So yeah, but I would be curious to hear, do you does it require you to travel to your clients or not even clients, potential clients to essentially have this face-to-face interaction, or do you see that having Zoom meetings and maybe online meetings is enough usually to get someone on board, earn the trust, and leverage the reputation that the company has already built over the last decades?
A lot of times, initial meetings are done in person or over a phone call. Anything that's other that can get that we can get a personal relationship with and get it developed. A lot of times, what you'll see is a lot of people are afraid to pick the phone up, which is, you start trying to conduct sales over email or text, and you're not really able to articulate someone's feelings as well, and you're not able to catch on tone and things of that nature. So a lot of times, if I'm not able to get in front of them in person, at a minimum, via phone call or Zoom.
Yeah, they should send their jet to take you to them and then have those meeting maybe in the air at one point. I can imagine that would be a lead experience for sure. So you essentially take us through the customer journey. So you have someone who they're not maximizing benefits of that ownership. After all, it's a plan. I don't think you should get emotionally attached to it, especially if it costs you so many millions. It should somehow make you money as well. So you have someone interested. What happens then? You've mentioned also in the previously that you can take care of everything from maintenance to charting it and essentially managing it all for them. So take us through the typical customer journey.
So essentially, with those management clients, we bring them on. We start to educate them about some of the revenue offset that can be provided under a management company. We'll give them forecasts, and also because they're become a part of our network, we also extend the field discounts, extensive pilot training, and the maintenance. so they can really start to see an immediate cost saving aspect to their operation. The next portion is they get to actually get assigned a dedicated representative to their account. So no matter how much they fly or how little they fly, every trip that they have on the books or they would have flown on their plane is always going to be accounted for. Uh, part of the other part of that job on the client client rep side is to align the client's actions in regards to revenue to the correct team. Generally, there's a handful of ways to that the costs. And if you're an owner that prioritizes your trips and you have a lot of owner trips that are reserved, typically the trips that you do are going to be high revenue just because you're not going to have as much flexibility on your points. But on the reverse side, if you're someone that flies very little and you're looking to just optimize the asset as much as possible to offset your own costs, you may put your plane in a position where it could float for extended periods of time. So that way the profit margin can be higher and you give yourself some more time to recoup some of the costs that would have been associated with flying it empty.
Sense. I see those empty legs posts all the time across LinkedIn, X, Facebook. I'm really on Instagram, so I don't see it there, but I can imagine it's all social media platforms are all might have some of your clients, especially now with celebrities and people that actually fly private a lot. So yeah, I can imagine that. But was there ever an instance that you heard of that it is possible to break even with annual maintenance cost and upkeep cost of the plane for some of your clients, or is it never, is that too utopic to even think about breaking even of that ownership?
Well, during COVID, we saw some incredibly weird stuff in the market.
Uh,
Um,
yes.
it was a unicorn event, and we had people buy in at planes at $2 million, and they were able to sell at three. I mean, it's not very common, and I definitely don't recommend anyone try to do that because it is a jet, it is a depreciating asset. However, the COVID scenario, that would be a very
Unique.
unique scenario that has occurred.
So it sounds like the watch industry and also the exotic car and hypercar industry, maybe exotic more common because you could literally buy a brand new Lambo, or Ferrari was tougher, but a Lambo or any other like AMG type of car, Astons, and in 6 months you could sell the car for a profit back to the same dealership that you got the car from. And you could do this actually, if I remember, you could even do this with with even with Range Rovers that they are very common to break. And the same with watch industry. You saw watches that are worth 30, 25, 30K selling for 100, 120, 150K. And the same with, higher end watches selling for half a million. And you spend 150K on a watch and you could flip it for 3X or 4X within, a week, not even that. So that was crazy times. I remember. So I guess in the private jet industry, it happened as well. Cameron, you've mentioned pilot training on multiple occasions already. So what does it really mean? Is it that there's a need for more pilots in the industry, or there is a need for continuous training for existing pilots? What's the case in that in your industry?
Well, for the longest amount of time, there was a pilot shortage. Anybody that was a pilot, they had market dominance in regards to um, the balance to fly these aircraft. We're starting to see that level off, and it's becoming back to a norm where there's enough pilots to fly these aircraft, and they're well trained. And now the price of those guys are actually starting to come back down. But to that point, there is a recurring training that it has to go on in order for a pilot to fly on these aircraft. Because they're complex machines, you're either going to have a pilot get trained every 6 months or every 12 months, depending on what type of program you're under.
Makes sense. Yes, I can imagine that continuous training will be necessary. And one story that I have that I remember, an old client from the business I was involved in had a private jet for a long time, and his pilot passed away. And he decided to never ever again hire anyone else. He was so attached to that person, was working with him for 20 plus years or longer. Yeah, he decided to retire his plane, sell it to retire his plane, his ownership, I guess, and sell the plane. And now he has some sort of membership, which I forget the name of it right now, but a similar membership that, as I mentioned earlier. So essentially, they have to provide him with a jet within, I think, 2 to 4 hours or something like that. And obviously, if he is using it up until a certain amount of mileage per year. So, or hours, actually, not mileage, hours per year. So he prefers that. So he felt very big responsibility of the crew and especially the pilot. So he was very emotional with that. So I remember that story. And I guess part of being a great pilot is also the fact that you're willing to continue to train and then continue to develop. And I can also imagine that there is a big advancement happening in the aviation space. All the newer jet probably come with more sophisticated systems, and
Yeah.
that's probably another thing as well. So, do you see often your clients upgrading the planes to the newer versions? Because I see whenever sometimes I look at those listing, planes are very old, 20 years, 30 years, 10 years is pretty young from what I'm hearing for a plane, or even anything below that. So do you see your clients upgrading to a different plane as well always, or do they keep the same plane, essentially have a management company to manage it, and then they get another plane? What are the scenarios that you see in that higher echelon world?
Well, the best scenario is when you're under a management company, they're able to keep the asset priced pretty aggressively in the market. So your asset tends not to lose as much value as it would if it was managed by, self-managed. But from my experience, the the biggest thing or the biggest advantage that you'll see in this market is when you are under a management company and you do have a asset that people still want aggressively, you will find that a lot of those guys will try to upgrade just because they know the ins and outs of the market and how to optimize the jet so that it can become a reasonable resource for them. So in the past, you'll see a lot of Citation 3, CJ3 model aircraft owners. They will upgrade to a Citation Excel, or a Phenom 100 owner upgrade to a Phenom 300. A lot of times, just because it's an accessible aircraft, they're anticipating the market needs for charter, and they're also able to maintain the aircraft's presence and standards so that it can have a good resale value.
One question that I have is, how many hours do you have to be flying to consider they're either a corporate client or, like you said, an artist or celebrity? How many hours do you typically see them flying to make sense of a private jet ownership versus, flying commercial?
Well, it really depends on their mission. A lot of times, if they're going to remote locations, then flying a jet would make more sense than to fly commercial just because of the time element. Whereas you have other owners and they fly semi frequently, but not too much. But there is airline or empty leg traffic that can go back and forth. We tend not to recommend a private jet solution, at least ownership, to that specific client, and it really depends on the person and their appetite of what they want and how much they want to utilize the asset themselves. So I've seen it range from 50 hours, typically starting when people start to buy their own jet, all the way up to about 150 hours when it starts to really make sense and it's like, hey, you should go ahead and buy a jet. And usually when someone's reaching 100, 150 to 100, 125 hours, that's already a consideration just because the direct operating costs and the insurance some of the other fixed costs associated with owning a jet, it just starts to make more sense, especially when you add the charter revenue on top of that.
Plus nicer, more pleasant experience, I would say.
Absolutely. Some of these guys, they love to control the experience to a T. So anytime that's a lever that you can
Cool.
negotiate on,
Yeah,
it's a
I can imagine. Yeah, we have to hear three airports. So I hear it's a great place where we live in Coachella Valley, where you can train pilots. So like one of our close friends' father wanted to start. He's a pilot himself, a recreational pilot, and he wanted to open a school in Palm Springs Airport, because outside of Palm Springs we have two private airports, and they all,
mhm.
I don't know the lingo, but they all have three different types of landing and taking off. So according to the atmosphere, because you're in the valley, so different winds blowing, whatever that is. Don't quote me on that, but he said it's an excellent place here to train pilots, and you see a lot of obviously private jets here, and that would be one of the things you have from Palm Springs Airport to, for example, Coachella Festival. Yeah, during the season, festival season or tennis tournaments, you still have to drive sometimes 45 to 60 minutes, even though you land in Palm Springs. And a lot of people don't know. So yeah, if you could land right next to the polo fields with your private jet, you can only do it with the private jet. Then you only have to travel 5 minutes. So there's obviously benefits from it as well. Cameron, what are the uses of artificial intelligence or any some cool innovations that you've seen, whether for you and what your role is at the company, or perhaps anyone else at the company that are using artificial intelligence and AI?
Well, I have seen AI try to do charter sales. It's not very
Interesting.
good. So it's a learning process for. However, from my point of view, and what I'm using for is lead scoring and prospect scoring. So if there's a like kind account uh, that you have a high success rate with, you basically can develop a scoring system that the AI can analyze and replicate to see how likely you can benefit another company or person. I started using this system in early June, and it's not perfect, but it's pretty accurate in terms of being able to detect if someone has a use case to fly private and if they would be able to get value from the service.
Interesting. I think that that's the best use case for AI in general, so far, at least. I know that there's all kinds of interesting tools like that video platform now, where you can become anyone, and it's pretty realistic. To your point, analyzing certain data, the data inputs, if you're looking for the same outcome, essentially score in that case, and that's probably AI is going to save you tons of time. Another idea that I had as I was preparing for the interview, for the conversation, what to be some ROI calculators. And for example, any data that you can feed into based on the aircraft, maybe what are let's say, based on the mileage or your hours flown for the aircraft, and maybe the model of it and the year of it, etc. What are the maintenance costs versus, a newer plane or an older plane, or what can they expect? Based on the data that you guys feed in on how similar planes are operating, how often, etc., or which profit margins. Those are the things that I can imagine AI being really helpful for. And the scoring element, absolutely, it's a great idea. I think AI does really good job at those things. Sometimes I'm surprised that the more tasks you give it to think for it almost on its own, the worse the outcome it is. I guess it's good. Hopefully we'll continue to learn critical thinking for ourselves, and not outsource, thinking. So there's skills that are still not replaceable by AI. I hope. We'll
Well, it
see how.
almost gives you superpowers. It's a
Exactly.
it's one of those scenarios where you went from doing maybe 5 or 6 deals a day and trying to do research and really understand the client's needs to now you're able to do between 30 and 50.
Exactly. Yes, it saves you time, and it's usually not the AI itself that's going to replace you, but the person that mastered AI, leveraging AI. for the things that actually matter, not to waste your time on a bunch of unrelevant tasks. So I agree with you that. Cameron, what's the most fulfilling for you at your job that you're doing?
Uh, the most fulfilling thing is being able to get someone on the right aircraft and then being able to save them from a bad scenario whenever that may happen. Typically, the most common event is I'll have a customer come to me for a trip. It's not it's not cheap, and they will go to the ends of the earth to find someone else to do it cheaper, which is fine, but that's almost like rolling the dice. So typically in those cases, I'll stay with the client, continue to engage and to talk with them. But the day of the trip, the plane can break, the plane can never show up.
Interesting.
I've heard millions of stories on horror stories on what's happened in regards to that, and being able to stay with the client and educate them. Well, here's why. This is why we cost more. This is why we have these things in place, and we have a team that can go out and help set up backup plans, and we have a backup plan for the backup plan, and we are able to fulfill your trip and fulfill the need for you no matter what, as opposed to someone that just does the trip based on price. So typically, um, that is the most fulfilling thing in being able to walk with somebody through this journey in private aviation, just because it is the Wild Wild West, and you never know what you're going to get in terms of client service.
Wow. So those are my I guess three most interesting takeaways so far from the conversation. One, that even in that, like I said, higher echelon industry, or mostly consider higher echelon industry, there's still some bad actors. I mean, plane not showing up if you're getting a private jet, that's unheard of. I mean, interesting, but I guess it happens. Second would be that relationship matter, and that's definitely a big thing. So relationship, something can go wrong, and then essentially that someone is still looking to make a deal and find a cheaper solution.
Uh,
That's a good, it's an interesting paradox for sure. I would expect that they don't really look at the price; they just do it based on the need. And if you're quick enough to provide them with the right aircraft at the right time, then they will not even look at the price. But I guess even at that level, or maybe even more, to be honest, maybe at that level they look more at the numbers. I don't know. I guess.
well, typically after about three times of that happening, they would then just say, "Okay, I trust you to go ahead and just to fulfill the need."
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, if you had an opportunity to sit across the table from Cameron, who's just starting, maybe even before the military, since you have the military and civilian experience, what advice would you have for him?
I would say get in the business earlier. Just being able to provide value to more people and being able to be a resource that they see as valuable is something that I think is undervalued in, I don't want to say my line of work, but just just in general. A lot of times I found myself just being pulled into the right room, and I consider myself very lucky to be even remotely in some of the scenarios how I got the opportunity to be in. But typically, I think if you're able to be a resource for people and people see you as valuable, then you'll almost always have a seat at the table, and you'll almost always be able to benefit from it financially or however in life.
Love it. And if you allow me to compare your solution suggestion, and not solution, but suggestion to one of my previous guests, for perspective might give you good perspective as well. He said the exact same thing to essentially get into the business earlier. However, he started his business career at the age of 47, if I remember correctly, and he is extremely excited every single day. Every time we have a call, it's like 5 or 6 a.m. because he's based in Europe, in Netherlands. It's 5 or 6 p.m. He stays at the office. Last time we were recording, his wife came in with the dogs and was wondering where he is because it's time for dinner. It was Friday, 6, 7. Actually, we ended at 7:30 p.m. his time. He was super excited to share stories from his experience and essentially what they do and why they do it. And he shared the same advice to his younger self, essentially get into business earlier, get your boots on the ground and start making mistakes, trying, figuring out, and providing value, being a valuable resource for people that you serve. And that's a different type of service as well, obviously, than a military experience. But I guess that's a great advice. And now, my last question for you today: what are you most excited about in the near future?
I am most excited about specifically what this company is doing in regards to changing the space and in the private aviation arena. I mean, we are implementing. We're not a small company, but we're also not a big company. So we're implementing a lot of things that are able to hold people accountable and empower them to make the right decision. Which I'm not sure if you guys ever heard of a program called EOS, but
Yes,
it's
entrepreneur.
we're officially rolling that out. And
Nice.
I think I've been a part of it for maybe a month with under the program, but I'm incredibly excited to see exactly how the company grows and what it becomes underneath this new operating system.
Yes, I read the book Traction, which inspired me to set the right milestone or decide what the rocks are and all the
Mhm.
lingo, that year plan, 1 year plan, and 10-year plan. But yeah, it's something that we'll definitely revisit in the near future. But yeah, I'm very familiar, and a lot of guests have used that or are using it. In fact, I had one implementer who arranged a podcast with me because one of the things they were working on was more content, more podcast appearance, which helps you with search engine optimization, more websites linking to your website, which is in our case YouTube, and where we're gonna feature your profile, and LinkedIn, where we're gonna share the lessons that I've taken away from the conversation, and you will do the same. So essentially, this arranged by the EOS implementer that was hired for by the by the company. So I see that happening. Yes, it's an exciting move for sure. And you're in a very exciting industry. Like I said in the beginning, I believe this industry is becoming more and more accessible as we start in this time. A lot of people start making money much earlier than their 40s and 50s because of blockchain, because of e-commerce, because of AI. Now AI is another wave. So obviously everyone wants to get to that level to be able to have their own jet and manage it, or be just commuting with that form of transportation. So I wish you nothing but success. I hope that the expansion plans are going to be happening very quickly, and you're going to crush your goals and then your stones, I guess, according to EOS plan, much faster than expected. Thank you so much for the conversation, Cameron.
Thank you.